Welcome to the WPIAL Blitz Show. I'm Badge. That's my buddy Ian. And Ian, why don't you introduce our very special guest for this week's show?
Yeah, we're honored to have Coach Matt Miller of the Mckeesport Tigers, who pulled off a pretty big victory over Thomas Jefferson this past week and has a showdown now with Bell Vernon for the conference title. So Coach Miller, thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations on the big win over TJ, your second in 2 years. And not many teams have been able to do that against Thomas Jefferson. So, you guys run a very unique offense. We've talked a lot about the Mckeesport triple option, and, you're part of that legacy. You played for the team and now coach the team. So, talk a little bit about yourself, the program, and, the win over TJ.
Well, thanks for having me, number one. It's an honor to be on the show. But the triple option, it started actually my senior year in high school. Coach Smith, George Smith, the legendary coach here, my coach, and I coached under him as an assistant also, brought the triple option in 1991. And we had players like Mike Logan that played for the Steelers, which helped make the offense work pretty well. Getting a guy like that to football and makes you look like a good play caller, that's for sure. But it's a staple for our program. We usually have kids that can run the ball. We usually don't have very big linemen. So this offense is perfectly designed for the kids that we have in our school.
It's, do you find that that offense really creates such nightmares for your opponents because it's, kind of from way back when?
Yeah, it's pretty neat whenever you think about it with the coaches I had that put it in are now in their 70s. And, most of the coaches that I'm coaching against are in their 30s, 40s, early 50s. So, yeah, it's kind of an obsolete offense that a lot of people don't understand. And I've been blessed that I have, 30 years of experience before me running that offense. And they were, gracious enough to teach me the offense and how to run it and all the different, corrections you can make with it. And makes it very difficult to stop, especially, with 1 week to prepare for it.
Yeah, we've seen that over the years too. I mean, Mckeesport's been a successful program back in Quad A and then in 5A for a few years and now in 4A, that even as, the classifications have changed, the enrollments changed, the success has continued, which is really cool to be able to see. So you mentioned, coaching under Coach Smith as well. But, with the TJ game, was there, something you guys saw on tape going into the game that you thought you could exploit, or was it just that, Kanye Thompson and Bobby Boyd were just that much better than, the guys TJ was trying to defend with?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't go into the game thinking we were going to score, as many points as we did. Obviously the kickoff return was pretty special by Kanye. They had tied the game up, and being able to get that return really put the momentum back on our side. But there's certain things with the triple, it causes people problems, and they have some really good players. And the old adage, which is triple option, if you can't block them, read them. And, so we started reading a lot of people on that line to eliminate, that one-on-one block with a guy that, is probably a Division I type of kid.
Yeah, they've got a few of those on the line. They've got some big boys in there.
Yeah, they have some big ones, that's for sure.
What does it mean to your program to, to do what Ian just talked about, in consecutive years, really knock off, kind of the program that everybody is, looking at every single year to knock off? I mean, what does that mean to you as a coach, and what does it mean to your kids?
It means a lot, especially the community. I couldn't believe how many people reached out to me, from guys I played with growing up to old timers. We have a dinner every year at the local country club from old football players that raise money for scholarships for our kids. And, those guys were all shooting me text messages, 10, 11 o'clock Friday night after the win. So it's obviously very special. And, when you're coaching and you're playing, sometimes you don't realize it, but how much it means to your community, and a community like ours, which has a good history. And we're close in proximity to Thomas Jefferson. We're only, 15, 20 minutes away. So it meant a lot to us. It meant a lot to the school. And, we don't have much time to celebrate. We have to turn around right now and play another big game this weekend.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about the community, because I'm on a couple like Facebook groups about WPIAL football stuff, and there's a lot of Mckeesport people on there talking a lot of trash this week that, basically saying, that they waited for years to get a shot at Thomas Jefferson because TJ had always been afraid to play them, and TJ had always been in a lower classification, and now that you got the shot at him and have taken him down twice in 2 years, so that's pretty impressive. I think earlier this year we talked to Matt Humbert, Bell Vernon's coach, and I think at that time, since 2014 or 2015, Thomas Jefferson had only lost 5 conference games, and 2 of them were to Bell Vernon and 1 was to Mckeesport. So now they've lost 6, and 2 are to Bell Vernon and 2 are to Mckeesport. But 2 in 2 years is much more impressive than 2 in 6 or 7 years. So it's not often they lose, and it's it's a special program that's able to beat them and have that sustained success over multiple years too.
Yeah, notice those people are all talking trash after the game. So, it means a little more if you talked it before. But yeah, I don't need any more added pressure. It's not like TJ's knocked out of the playoffs yet either. So, no one wants to play them, and eventually, if things go really well, I'm going to have to play them or Bell Vernon twice during the season to get to where we want to be. So, I'm going to keep my trash talking to myself for at least another couple of weeks.
Yeah. You talk about that as well. I mean, how do you keep, your team emotionally up there, not to get too high, but, emotionally, hey, enjoy this win, but understand, what the long-term goals are too, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, coming with a business approach. Handling your business, taking care of your bodies, focused, for the last 24 hours, getting to bed early, and it sounds stupid. It sounds like stuff that you would do, but, as kids, you only have so many Friday nights in your mind that, and it's like, I kind of tell them, hey, we've been at this for almost a year. Don't screw it up. It's like, this is so important. You only get how many chances to play this game. And so really trying to press on them from Thursday to Friday night. And then when that buzzer sounds, hey, let's enjoy, let's celebrate the win, and then, back to the grind. And we've actually taken it off a little easier on them. We've been calling off on Saturdays for them. So they've been off Saturday, Sunday,
wow.
And then coming in on Monday and trying to, get a lot of film and lifting the weights, but, trying to set up for, possibly a run, give our bodies a little bit of a break, give each other a break from each other. And the coaches are in there working, but, kind of letting the kids sleep and rest up and get ready for the next game.
Yeah. That's great, and shows you really have the pulse of your team too to know what they need. So heading into this game with Bell Vernon, conference title on the line. Obviously your playoff spot's secured, but with a chance to win the conference title, both teams like to run the ball. They've got a talented duo in their backfield, just like you guys do. So, what are you guys doing to approach this game? Anything different or special, or just it's business as usual?
No, I mean, you always have to prepare. I mean, people like Whitlock and Martin are, pretty special players. They're not average guys. And luckily this season, we played against some pretty mobile quarterbacks when we played up in Buffalo against the team from Canisius. Their kid was dynamic. And then, playing Rodney Gallagher from Laurel Highlands was, also very electric when he has the ball in his hands. So we do a lot of drills. We call it the rabbit drill, working on maintaining and containing players. And it's worked well. We didn't do it before Canisius, and it was exposed. And then, we did a little bit better against Laurel Highlands. But we know we have a pretty special ball player that we're facing this week. And, it's not going to be an easy task, but we're hoping we can contain them somewhat.
Yeah. Well, that Canisius team's ranked like 3rd or 4th in the state of New York in their highest classification. So, I mean, that was a great game for you guys to take on, because that was, a premier opponent from a neighboring state too.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a good experience for our kids. A lot of our kids haven't been on a college campus, and to be able to go visit Edinburgh University, that's where we played. We ate in their cafeteria. They were very hospitable to us, and they got to walk around campus, got to watch a little bit of a soccer practice and a couple other things, but kind of gave them a little bit of a view of what college life would be. Mm-hmm. And then got to see what college football players look like too, because that Canisius team was pretty dang good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was, to me, that was always the highlight of my high school. And I'm originally from Indiana, but the one thing that we did, and it was a great motivator, was every year we always had a college overnighter, and it was a long game. I mean, where you had to take the bus and it was a sleepover. You played a game on Friday night, and then you slept over, and then you actually went to a college football game on a Saturday. And we actually would always go and watch like one of our guys playing college football. And that's where it all hits home. I think you made a great point about what it was like to see college guys play football, because it is an eye-opening experience for these guys to actually see football on the next level, isn't it?
Definitely. We do that a lot. We've been doing that a couple of years with our ninth grade program. Our ninth grade football team has gone up to like Youngstown State. Like how you were saying, we had a couple guys playing up there. So we try to go to different places that these kids could, see the campus, but ultimately go and see, different Mckeesport kids play. And, that's really the goal. I mean, everyone talks about the NFL, but our kids really are focused on hoping that they can get a college scholarship and hoping to be on one of those college campuses. And, so if you can see it, you can be it. So that's something that's, nice to be able to get those kids in those types of experiences.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
Ian.
thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate the time. We don't want to take too much of your time. I know you have a lot to prepare for this week for Bell Vernon, but best of luck, not only this week, but also going forward into the playoffs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And good luck with the show. I'll be tuning in now. This is a good time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Matt. We really appreciate it. Have a good season, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And there goes Matt.
Not yet. I'm trying.
Well, yeah.
I didn't say anything bad about me.
It's all good.
Call my wife in.
That's all right. Just that. There we go. Okay.
All right.
He really does like the show. He doesn't want to leave.
I think a couple of his kids scored touchdowns faster than he was able to get out of the show last week. I mean, they've got some fast kids. That I was watching the game online. I mean, that kickoff return. I mean, the kid made like one move and was just gone down the sideline. Bobby Boyd, their running back. I mean, he's been outstanding all year. They've been a really fun team to watch. And I think Mckeesport kind of got slept on a little bit because they beat they beat Woodland Hills, who was a 5A team in non-conference play. But then like when they started conference play, they played some of the lower, rung opponents in the conference. And people were kind of
really
like, oh,
they're tough to connect the dots.
Right. It's like, oh, they're supposed to beat that, they're supposed to beat them 42-6. Okay. And they're beating them 42, so it wasn't really a good measuring stick to have. And then they had that early loss to that Canisius team, which, like I said, in New York's biggest classification is like the third or fourth ranked program in the state. So,
that's a traveling team too. Canisius plays all over the place. They played at Bishop McDevitt in Harrisburg and whatever like that. So
yeah. I think they're in that like New York Catholic or New York Prep League or whatever it is. Yeah. And then, so this was really, and they handled Laurel Highlands, which is, a team they probably should have handled pretty easily. And then it was like, okay, they got their last two games against TJ and Bell Vernon, and we'll see how they stack up. And then they go out and beat TJ 42-28, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, it's not like when Bell Vernon beat TJ earlier this year, it was on a last second touchdown, and it was it was a great game. It was a back and forth game, but it was Bell Vernon had the ball last and scored and won. This was just, they handled TJ. TJ was struggling to move the ball up and down the field. And they got, their 4 1-yard touchdown runs basically by driving the length of the field, but they were not getting easy yards against Mckeesport's defense. Mckeesport, made them struggle and work for everything they got. And even those plays down on the 1-yard line, it wasn't like they got down there and punched it into the end zone. It was like the third or fourth try, that they had to go for it on 4th and goal from the 2 to make it. That, Mckeesport was playing really strong defensively on the line against, like Coach Miller said, some really good TJ linemen too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The reason I asked the emotional question is that, look, would it be great for them to beat Bell Vernon this week? Yeah, it would, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the game after this week. Okay. This game doesn't matter. Now, like I said, how in that long-term goal, that's why I asked the question. They have, they've beaten a tough opponent in TJ, and, that was an emotional win. They've got Bell Vernon. Boy, it would be nice to get that momentum, but does it really matter? It's the game the week following it matters of whether they continue their season, not this one. So, I don't know. I'm always one of those guys that kind of is tied to that. The game doesn't matter. It matters in November. And it does matter in November. Not that it doesn't matter this week, because it does, but does it matter as much as in November when it's win or go home? I think so.
Well, that's a great segue into our show, because we're going to talk a lot tonight about what's going to happen in November, because we're almost there. We're in the last week of the regular season. So thanks to everyone for tuning in to the WPIAL Blitz show. And we've got a lot of content to run through here tonight, so we'll try to get through it all.
Yeah, try and get it. I'll try and be quiet this week.
Biggest win of the week was obviously Mckeesport toppling the two-time defending state champs and Thomas Jefferson. 3 outstanding games or actually 4 outstanding games that happened this week. Upper St. Clair against South Fayette. South Fayette was up 28-13. Upper St. Clair got 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter, and then we're still down 28-21 and got an untimed down thanks to a pass interference call on South Fayette, and chucked the ball into the end zone and scored a touchdown with no time left on the clock to tie it and send it to overtime. And then Ethan Heister blocked South Fayette's field goal in overtime, and Upper St. Clair turned around and kicked the field goal and won the game. Laurel Highlands and Trinity just went back and forth all night. And it was just a fantastic game that Laurel Highlands wound up scoring last and winning. But it was just a game with essentially a playoff spot on the line that Laurel Highlands pulled out in the end. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Not too many spoilers here. But it was just a back and forth contest. Same with Pine Richland and Kiski. Kiski actually had a lead on Pine Richland in the fourth quarter, and it was kind of
were you surprised at that score? I was, that it was so close.
I was surprised also. I mean, Kiski had won some games earlier this year against less good opponents, so I thought this was really Kiski's last gasp to try and get in the playoffs. And with the win, Pine Richland clinched the spot and Kiski's eliminated. But it was back and forth all night. Pine Richland's starting quarterback Cole Boyd was still out with his injury, so hopefully he's able to make it back for the playoffs. But I mean, those Kiski kids have nothing to hang their head about. They fought as hard as they could and had the ball at the end, and Pine Richland got a fumble on Kiski's final drive. And yeah, it was a back and forth game all night. And then in one of the craziest games, Ligonier Valley was handling Shadyside Academy pretty well. I think it was like 26-7 or 26-6, something like that. And then in the second half, Shadyside returned a kickoff and an interception for a touchdown to cut the lead to still 7 points. And then Ligonier Valley had the ball. All they had to do was kneel it out, and they fumbled the snap, and Shadyside scooped it up and ran it back for a touchdown to cut it to 26-25. Shadyside went for 2 in the win, and Ligonier Valley got the stop. But wow, that was just an insane ending to a game.
Wow.
Upset of the week came courtesy of Northgate, whose head coach we interviewed earlier this year, Michael Fulmore. So they kept their playoff hopes alive after they entered the season with the longest losing streak in the WPIAL, and now have a shot to make the playoffs in the final week of the season. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Mount Lebanon clinched the conference title by beating Seneca Valley. Moon clinched their conference title with a win over Bethel Park. And North
they
Catholic
just keep rolling. I think those are your 6A and 5A favorites. Obviously, they keep rolling.
Yeah. North Catholic and Central Valley clinched their conference titles in 3A. And then Ambridge, who entered the year with the second longest losing streak in the WPIAL, beat Quaker Valley to clinch a playoff spot. So Ambridge also getting into the playoffs. Congrats to the Bridgers. Also some other too far ahead. But yeah, spoiler. Playoff spots clinched. So conference champions, there are 5 conference championships left to be decided this week, and there are 15 playoff spots left available. So I won't read them all, but here's a list for anyone that wants to pause the screen and look through it of everyone that has clinched a playoff spot. The teams that are bolded are ones that clinched their spot this week.
Well, that's always a good slide to take a picture of and send out as a teaser.
Yes, it is. Our WPIAL Blitz Show Player of the Week was none other than Rodney Gallagher from
None
Laurel
other.
Highlands. I mean, this kid, he put the team entirely on his back to beat Trinity. Laurel Highlands had a 19-14 halftime lead, and then Trinity returned a block punt for a touchdown to go up 22-19. Gallagher had a 55-yard touchdown run. And then Trinity scored, and then Laurel Highlands drove it back down, and he threw like a jump pass touchdown. And then Trinity scored again to take a 34-33 lead and at the end of the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, Rodney Gallagher scored again on another touchdown run to seal up the game with the game-winning points, as we mentioned. That Laurel Highlands won 39-34. So 100 passing yards and a touchdown, 285 rushing yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's nearly 400 yards of total offense, 385 yards of total offense, 6 total touchdowns in a game that clinched a playoff spot for his team. First time Laurel Highlands has made the playoffs since 2015. So congratulations to the Mustangs. Just a great performance overall by one of the most talented players in the WPIAL. Coach Miller talked about how hard he was to defend, and he's just one of the most exciting players with the ball in his hand. And a great two-sport player too. He has Division I offers in both football and basketball, and he's only a junior, so we get another year of him too. There were so many good performances this week. It was hard to pick a top 5. So in addition to Gallagher, we have Braylon Lovelace from Leechburg, who ran for 7 touchdowns, our first 7 touchdown performance of the season. Chandler Timmons, quarterback from Highlands, accounted for 5 total touchdowns in a game that clinched a playoff spot for the Golden Rams. Bobby Boyd from Mckeesport, 227 yards and 3 touchdowns against Thomas Jefferson, which is just an incredible performance against that defense. And then Ethan Heister, who I mentioned earlier from Upper St. Clair, just an overall, all around, both sides of the ball performance. I mean, the 163 rushing yards, 67 passing yards, 13 receiving yards, a rushing touchdown, a passing touchdown, and then defensively 12 tackles, 4 for a loss, 1 sack, and the blocked field goal in overtime that set them up to win the game. I mean,
these stat lines in the WPIAL this year have just been like cartoonish.
It's like, I mean, and those were the guys like that made my top 5 list. There was, I mean, there were great performances. Carter Green, the quarterback from Penn Trafford, had 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns. Kanye Thompson from Mckeesport had 2 rushing touchdowns and a kick return touchdown. The guy that I struggled to keep off the list, but I only had 5 slots, Zach Boyd from Elizabeth Forward, had 192 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns on just 4 catches. He caught 4 balls and had scored on 3 of them, and he returned a fumble for a touchdown. Our guy Najee Burt from Steel Valley, who's the WPIAL's leading rusher, 194 yards and 4 touchdowns. It just, all around great performances this week that it was hard to pick just a top 5. But some other shout outs that I wanted to give were on some career accomplishments. So Trenton Carter, a quarterback from Carmichael's, surpassed 1,000 rushing yards this week. He'd already gone over 1,000 passing yards, so he became the 12th player in WPIAL history to pass for 1,000 and rush for 1,000 in the same regular season. Luke McCoy from Laurel, he's the 2nd leading rusher in the WPIAL right now, became Laurel's all-time leading rusher. And then Colin Brady, surpassing 2,000 career yards might not sound like much, but this is noteworthy because he's only a sophomore. So he's a sophomore with already 2,000 career rushing yards. So he's a guy we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on over the next 2 years just to see how many he can rack up down in the Tri-County South, which, as we talked about before, has produced some high rushing totals in the past. So congratulations to those 3 guys, all great accomplishments. So our streak watch, not much noteworthy here. Everyone that had won before kept winning. Everyone that was losing before kept losing. The only one that got snapped was York, had an 8-game losing streak, and they beat Brownsville, who had come in on a 19-game losing streak. So that one continued. Noteworthy about Brownsville, this will probably be the last conference game they play for a while. Their school board voted to go independent for the next few years. So like their neighboring districts down in Fayette County of Uniontown and Albert Gallatin, they're going to be playing an independent schedule for the next few years to try and get themselves back on track. But, they've lost 20 games in a row. They haven't had a winning season since 2000. They need to do something to reinvigorate their program for a bit. So I understand why they did it. And hopefully, Brownsville was a team that back in the 70s, 80s, 90s was always a tough team to play. And it's not for lack of effort of the kids. The kids are going out there and battling. It's just they just don't have the numbers, and they were a struggling 2A program that got pushed up to 3A this year because of enrollment. And I read an article, and their athletic director's like, look, we only have like 12 or 13 kids at practice, and you can't even practice offense versus defense when you do that. He's like, on Friday nights we might be lucky to get 15 or 17, but just on any given day during the week, kids are busy, kids get sick, whatever, kids are hurt. That it's just hard when you don't have the numbers. Even competing at a 3A level is difficult. So hopefully they're able to turn their program around a little bit. On the conference winning streak side, everything pretty much continued on with same winning and losing streaks moving on there. And the playoff streaks, though, this is the noteworthy one that I will say I predicted at the beginning of the year. If you recall, my bold prediction was that Leechburg would end their 32-year playoff drought, which they did with a convincing 66-6 victory over Amani Christian. On the playoff appearance streak side, Mars and South Fayette both have opportunities this week to play their way into the playoffs. So they're 16 and 12-year playoff streaks are not dead yet, but they have to win and get some help for both of them, basically. And on the playoff drought side, the only other one here that really has a chance, I would say, well, Burrell has a chance this week, and South Allegheny has a chance this week. Are the only two there on the drought side that could see their 8-year playoff droughts come to an end.
And thanks to Get Recruited Consulting for the support of this program. Really, all of our programs here on SSP Network. Andrew Cohen going to have a camp starting in December. So, always just pick up the phone and give Andrew a call. If you've got any questions regarding what you should or shouldn't be doing regarding recruiting, Andrew's a great resource. And you can also drop him an email at andrewcohen@getrecruitedconsulting.com. Thanks so much, Get Recruited Consulting. Onward.
Yes. So our question this week was from my buddy Chris. Are you going to have seating predictions again this year? And yes, I am. And we will talk about them right now. Chris is a good dude. I've been friends with him on Twitter for a long time. Diehard Steelers fan, and he actually started his own kind of tour of the WPIAL to go to different stadiums, inspired by mine. He told me, he was like, I took your idea and I started doing it myself. It's been a lot of fun. So he's a good dude. Highly recommend following Chris on Twitter.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. All right. So looking at the playoff picture on the whole, I mentioned there were 15 playoff spots still available. So the ones shaded in yellow here are the conferences where there are still playoff spots to be had. The ones that are in white, the 3 or 4 spots are locked up. And so we'll just be keeping an eye on these moving forward. And just a reminder on how the standings are organized, that it goes by conference record only, and then head-to-head results, the Gardner points, which is based on conference games. It's a strength of victory metric. You get 10 Gardner points for each victory of the teams that you defeated. And then the WPIAL tiebreaker points is a margin of victory metric up to +10 or -10 based on games versus conference opponents. So in 6A, Mount Lebanon clinched the conference title. Central Catholic is locked into second place. North Allegheny and Seneca Valley will play for third and fourth place, and that is noteworthy because third place gets a first round bye, fourth place has to play in the first round, so there is something at stake in that game. Cannon McMillan, with their head-to-head win over Baldwin, either needs just a win over Central Catholic to get in, probably unlikely, or a Baldwin loss to Mount Lebanon, which is fairly likely. Baldwin, in order to get into the playoffs, would have to beat Mount Lebanon and have Central Catholic beat Cannon Mac. So a little less likely there. Cannon Mac probably seems like the most likely team to get in. So projected playoff bracket 6A is very easy, just because of how everything's organized. So Mount Lebanon, Mount Lebanon's first in the conference. They'll be the number 1 seed. Central Catholic's number 2. They'll be the number 2 seed. And then the winner of the North Allegheny Seneca Valley game is number 3. Loser goes to the 4 seed. And then either Cannon McMillan, most likely Cannon McMillan will be 5th just because they have that head-to-head tiebreaker over Baldwin. So I would say, if I was a betting person, I would say it would be Mount Lebanon 1, Central Catholic 2, North Allegheny 3, Seneca Valley 4, and Cannon Mac 5. In 5A, Moon, like we said, is just rolling right along to 9-0. Beat Bethel Park for the conference championship. Bethel Park plays Upper St. Clair this week for 2nd place in the conference. And then Peters Township just needs a win over South Fayette to clinch the last playoff spot here. This is the only remaining playoff spot available in 5A. West Allegheny, since they lost the head-to-head to Peters Township, would need a win over Moon, who is their rival. So, crazy things can happen in a rivalry game, and would also need a Peters Township loss in order to get in. South Fayette still could get in if they beat Peters Township by 10 points exactly, or 10 or more points, because with the tiebreaker points. So if you see Peters Township's at -13, if they lose by 10, they'll go to -23. South Fayette would go to -23 as well with the win. And then in a 3-way tie scenario where each team had beaten each other, South Fayette would then win the tiebreaker and get in. So South Fayette still has hope. In the Big East Conference, they do. In the Big East Conference, Penn Trafford has the conference title locked up. Gateway's pretty well solidified in 2nd. They play Franklin Regional this week. I guess if Franklin Regional somehow beat Gateway, there could be a 3-way tie there, and maybe Franklin Regional could get ahead. Probably not. But yeah, so it's no, actually they couldn't on tiebreaker points. So yeah, Gateway's locked into 2nd, Woodland Hills 3rd, Franklin Regional 4th. And that's pretty much that. And then in the Northeast Conference, this one got a little bit messy because you had North Hills beat Pine Richland beat Penn Hills beat North Hills. All those were really close games. So probably looking at a 3-way tie atop the conference here, unless something crazy happens like Fox Chapel beating Pine Richland, which could happen, but seems unlikely. If all the top 3 teams win, Penn Hills would most likely win the tiebreaker because of their tiebreaker points here with 19. So if Penn Hills beats Kiski by 10 or more points, then they have a pretty good chance, unless one of the other teams loses, of actually winning the tiebreaker for the top spot. But where it's going to get interesting is in the playoff seeding. So the bold ones up here are ones that have clinched conference titles. That's all the bold means, is they won a conference. So with 12 teams making it in 5A, there's 3 conference champions. So Moon at the number 1 seed is a pretty well shoo-in for the top spot. Penn Trafford hasn't lost a conference game yet, so probably a good slot at the number 2 seed. And then the question becomes, who gets the other 2 buys? I think Gateway's probably one of the next best teams, so I think Gateway should get a buy. But then coming down to that Pine Richland, Penn Hills, North Hills kind of tiebreaker, how does the WPIAL, and the WPIAL doesn't have to go by the conference standings. They usually do, but they don't have to, especially in these tiebreaker situations. Sometimes they kind of mix and match. So it'll just kind of depend on how everything sorts itself out. The one thing I did do here intentionally was by putting Gateway at the 4 seed. I put Gateway and Penn Trafford, which are conference opponents, on opposite halves of the bracket. Also, Pine Richland did beat Gateway head-to-head earlier this year, so that was my impetus for putting Pine Richland ahead of Gateway. And Gateway beat Penn Hills earlier this year, I believe. So that kind of evened that out as well. Franklin Regional, at just a 3-6 overall record, was pretty easily the last team there, and they'll probably lose to Gateway this week. So some variability here. And the hard thing is with 4 teams getting a bye, and then seeds 5, 6, 7, and 8 all get home playoff games in the next round. Trying to figure out which 3rd place teams here are going to get home playoff games was a little bit difficult to determine.
Why did you say you had to roll the dice? Okay,
a little bit, yeah. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But this would be my guess as of right now. The other thing I did try to do was make sure that none of the first round matchups here matched up teams that are in the same conference. So, if I had been honestly seeding this, like maybe I would have put Peters Township as like the 9th best team, but I wasn't going to put Peters against like Bethel Park or Upper St. Clair because they're in the same conference. So I did, knock Peters down a couple slots just so they weren't matched up against either Bethel Park or Upper St. Clair who were in their conference. But that is something that WPIAL does try and do, is to not have first round games against conference opponents. After the first round, it's fine. So you could have a Pine Ridge and North Hills rematch. You could have a Moon Upper St. Clair or Moon Bethel Park rematch. That's fine after the first round, but in the first round, at least they try not to match up conference opponents.
Okay.
On to 4A. The big showdown here between Mckeesport and Bell Vernon for the top spot in the Big 8 conference. Thomas Jefferson is locked into 3rd place, and Laurel Highlands is locked into 4th place. And congratulations to the Mustangs on making the playoffs for the first time in the 6th classification era. So, we interviewed Coach Colasar earlier this year. He talked about how they'd kind of been building up to this for a few years, and all that hard work's now paying off, and they're going to get to have a playoff game.
And that you make a great point, because it's very rare. A football program is like a freight train. Okay, it takes a while for it to get going, and it really kind of takes a while for it to, stop. And so, you don't just like flip on a switch and become a good football team. It takes years to do that. And Laurel Highlands, I think, is a perfect example of that.
Yep. And the other thing to keep an eye on with Laurel Highlands is that they have never won a playoff game. So, Coach Colasar talked earlier this year about, they're 0-10 in their history in the playoffs, that their goal was to not only get there, but to win one. So we'll see what can happen once they get there. But they're in the dance. That's the first start. The Greater Allegheny Conference, talked all year about how this had the potential to get a little crazy. After last weekend, I looked at the standings and I was like, all right, Hampton's in and Armstrong is in. And then you got, top 5 make the playoffs here. So you got the whole group of teams at 3-3, a couple teams at 2-4. I was like, this could get nuts. Like you could have a 4 or a 5-way tie in here, for these last couple playoff spots. But what I wound up doing was I just charted it all out, and all 16 possible results I looked at and kind of just drew a line across the board at number 5, where the top 5 make the playoffs. And lo and behold, in every possible scenario, both Highlands and Indiana make the playoffs. So Highlands and Indiana have officially now clinched a playoff spot, because in every scenario they got in. There is one scenario left where Mars gets in. So they have to beat Hampton. They need a Highlands win, an Indiana win, and a Plum win over Greensburg-Salem in order to get into the playoffs. And I'll say more or less, the Plum Greensburg-Salem game is what I'll call a casket match. So for those out there who are fans of, old 1990s wrestling, like I was back in the day, the Undertaker had the casket matches where he or his opponent would get put in a casket and rolled off. So, the idea with the casket match is the winner stays alive.
I'm going to have to remember that. That's home. A really good one.
Yeah. It's, winner stays alive and the loser, your season's over. So it's, if not for that one scenario, I'm pretty sure the Greensburg-Salem Plum game would be a casket match. So not a true casket match, but pretty close too. But yeah, Highlands and Indiana are in. Highlands with a win over Knock would be 3rd.
Indiana, they came through for me.
They did. They have some variability though, based on the scenarios, right? They could finish as high as 2nd if they beat Armstrong.
I know.
But they could finish, 3rd, 4th, or 5th otherwise. But they got in either way. And then the Parkway Conference, we do have. I mean, Aliquip has been a machine all year. Their only loss was to Central Valley, who's 2-time defending WPIAL champions in 3A. Right. Beaver and Newcastle both got in. Newcastle playing Aliquippa. Potentially could force a 3-way tie for the conference title, in which case Aliquippa would actually win the conference title on tiebreakers. So Newcastle's only hope to win the conference title is to not only beat Aliquippa, but have Blackhawk beat Beaver, which seems a little unlikely based on past results. Aliquippa's a machine.
I just sit here and shake my head at 4A in the WPIAL. What a gigantic minefield. I mean, Bell Verdon, Mckeesport, Aliquippa, Thomas Jefferson. Holy cow. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and I'll get to that in 1 second, but we do have a true casket match here between Chartiers Valley and Montour. I see they're both 1-3, and one of them's going to get in, and they're playing head to head. So the winner gets in, and the loser, season is over. So true casket match here between Montour and Chartiers Valley. But you're absolutely right. So yeah, you're absolutely right though. I mean, like you said, Hampton's undefeated. Bell Vernon undefeated right now. Mckeesport, their only loss was to that Canisius team. Aliquippa, their only loss was to Central Valley. So, and Thomas Jefferson.
Don't forget about Beaver either. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. And the hard thing here is that with 13 teams making the playoffs, there's only 3 byes. So one of the big questions has kind of been, are they going to give the 3 conference champions the byes? So like, is Bell Vernon Mckeesport playing for a first round bye, which I think would be wholly unfair to both of those teams.
How come they don't know that when they start the season? I think that having transparency when you start the season is what it's all about.
Well, they said they know how many teams from each conference make the playoffs, and they said the WPIAL is will seed the teams that qualify. So you qualify for the playoffs, and then this season, the only guarantee is that if you win your conference, you will get a home game for your first game, but that doesn't guarantee a bye. It just guarantees you'll be in the top 8 seeds. Mm-hmm. In the past, what they had done was that they had said like, okay, let's say there's 4 conferences in a classification. So like, let's take 2A, for example, right? Where there's 4 conferences. They said, if you come in the top 2, 16 teams make the playoffs. So top 4 from each conference are going to make it. The top 2 from each conference get home playoff games. So they'll be in the top 8 seeds. And then the bottom 2 will get road playoff games. But sometimes what you had happen was you might have like a 3-way tie for first place. And one of those teams had to then go on the road in the first round of the playoffs. And so there was some inequities there too. So I think having the WPIAL seed them is probably better. But there's some, there's just a logjam here. And honestly, I think like the Bell Vernon and Mckeesport have shown enough this year that they should be 2 of the top 3 seeds. I think Aliquippa should be one of the top 3 seeds as well. And the other thing too is that like, yeah, the winner of the Bell Vernon Mckeesport game should be the number 1 overall seed. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And you should also separate them on the bracket. Like you shouldn't put Bell Vernon first. Let's just say Bell Vernon wins, right? You shouldn't put Bell Vernon first and then Mckeesport 4th and have a potential semifinal between those 2. Like split them on opposite halves of the bracket.
Well,
and then, that drops Hampton down into this 4-5 game. But really, to me, there's no difference between the 2 seed and the 3 seed because you're still getting a first round bye. And there's really no difference between the 4 seed and the 5 seed, however those go. I think pretty clearly, like Bell Vernon, Mckeesport, Aliquippa, Thomas Jefferson, and Hampton in some order are your top 5 seeds, and everything else just kind of fills in from there.
Well, it's a good thing that the WPIAL has just an iron grip on everything that goes on there, because that would never fly anywhere else. I mean, that they're gonna I'm just saying. But look, I am embracing the difference. Okay. I'm just embracing the fact that they just do things differently. And you know what? Good for it. See, you brought me around. You brought me around, Ian.
And I'll say too that in the past, like I said, the WPIAL was really just kind of seeding the top 8 and the bottom 8. But now that they're seeding kind of everyone, this is the first year they're doing it this way. So it's kind of a new experience for everyone to see how they're going to do it.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, right. Yeah. So we'll see whether or not if it goes into the next 2-year rotation.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
I got one shot to get it right.
Yep. Well, they would have had 2 if COVID hadn't happened. They put this in.
They got one shot to get it right.
Yeah. So in 3A, North Catholic handled Freeport 33-7, and won the conference title there. Freeport's in, East Allegheny's in. So the interesting thing here is that Deer Lakes is at 3-2. But they lost head-to-head against Burrell. Burrell beat Deer Lakes a few weeks ago. So if Burrell beats Valley and Freeport beats Deer Lakes, then Burrell would actually get that last playoff spot. Deer Lakes, in order to get in, would either need Burrell to lose or to beat Freeport. So that's kind of the scenario here. Those are the only two teams that have a shot for that last spot. But even though Burrell appears further down the standings, they control their own destiny because they're basically in with a win and a Deer Lakes loss to a pretty good Freeport team. In the Interstate Conference, Elizabeth Forward has continued to just cruise on through here. Southmoreland, South Allegheny, and South Park, three teams battling for the last two playoff spots here in the middle of the pack. Southmoreland can get in with a win over South Park, and that is noteworthy also because 2 years ago in 2019, Southmoreland broke a 40-year playoff drought. They didn't make the playoffs between 1979 and 2019. And now with a win, they have a chance to get back for the second time in 3 years. So good on the Scotties. I'm pulling for them. South Allegheny, they beat South Park head-to-head. So if Southmoreland beats South Park, South Allegheny will also get into the playoffs. And we talked about them earlier, having that 8-year playoff drought and having a shot to get in. South Park needs a win and some help to be able to get in. In the Northwest 6 Conference, Central Valley has just dominated everyone they've played this year, and they continue to do so this past week. And congratulations to Ambridge on getting into the playoffs after they had carried that long losing streak into the season. So shout out to head coach Sherman McBride, an Aliquippa guy who went across the bridge to Ambridge to coach and has brought some success to their program. And, this is one of those things where, a 2-7 season may not look like much, but when you haven't won a game in 3 years, winning 2 makes a big difference. And all of a sudden they won the, I know this is your pet peeve, but they won the 2 that mattered, right? They beat Hopewell and Quaker Valley. And so they got to that 4th place slot in the conference.
I know, right? I mean, it's hard for me to imagine. You know what? I am trying to embrace the way that you do things out there. Okay. So,
yeah.
And I shouldn't say you, I mean, because it's not you. I'm just saying
just reporting the
that
facts.
The WPIAL, right. That the rules of engagement allow for that is very, I don't know.
Yeah.
Different. So.
So looking at the playoff picture here, 12 teams make it, so the top 4 get buys. Pretty clearly, the 3 conference champions are the best 3. We'll see how they align them. Even though Elizabeth Forward beat North Catholic in the semifinals last year, I think given that North Catholic is undefeated overall, they probably have the edge for the number 2 seed, and Elizabeth Forward would be the number 3 seed. But really, there's no distinguishable difference here. They're both getting a bye, and they're lined up for a semifinal matchup again for the right to play Central Valley for the WPIAL championship, because Central Valley's just been killing everybody. So they're just head and shoulders better. The real question on this bracket is who gets the number 4 seed between the 3 second place teams, between Avonworth, Freeport, and Mount Pleasant. I think Avonworth is probably the best of the bunch. Avonworth's only other loss, they're 7-2 overall, came against a really good Stowe Rocks team, and they played them close. It was like 19-16. So, to hold that Stowe Rocks team to just 16 points, I think Avonworth probably is the best of the bunch, even though they just got hammered by Central Valley. And then Mount Pleasant and Freeport for the next 2 spots. And then we'll see what happens with the rest of the bracket. I think if Southmoreland gets in, at 6-3 overall, they actually have a pretty good shot of landing in like the 7th or 8th seed slot. But since they're not clinched yet, I wasn't comfortable actually listing them out there. But I think if Southmoreland wins, they could get a home playoff game, which would be pretty cool.
It would be.
Yeah. Moving on to 2A. The second biggest game of the week. So the biggest game of the week is obviously the Mckeesport Bell Vernon game, but the second biggest game is the Sarah Catholic Steel Valley game. Both undefeated, both been hammering all of their opponents. Najee Burt's leading the WPIAL in rushing. Sarah Catholic's offense has just been outstanding with Max Rocco at quarterback and all the talented playmakers they have. Sarah's defense has been phenomenal this year. I think they've scored like 6 or 7 defensive touctouchdowns this year. They've just been all around, just hammered. Both teams have been hammering.
They have just seen. Look, it is. How can a 9-0 team like that fly under the radar? But they just seem, because they're a 2A team, but for some reason that just doesn't seem to be like the glamour classification anymore on the WPIAL, because the other teams successful and everything have made them play up. But what do you think?
Yeah, there's some darn stinking good 2A teams this year. I mean, between Sarah Catholic and Stowe Rocks and Laurel and Washington and Steel Valley and even Beaver Falls is pretty good. I think one of the reasons with 2A is that because Southern Columbia statewide has dominated 2A for so long, that everyone else in 2A is just it's almost felt like not going through the motions, because winning the
I know what you're saying, that there wasn't an ultimate goal. The ultimate goal for every WPIAL champion is to win a state title. And for so long, it's been out of reach because of Southern Columbia.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying, really?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, that was very well put. Yes. Yep. And for a while, I felt like, especially before we went to 6 classifications, just because of, how the state tournaments usually played out with like the Catholic schools and the District 12 schools winning a lot of them. Like around here, at least, like winning a WPIAL title meant more than winning a state title for a long time, like before we went to 6 classes. And I will say, I think one of the benefits of 6 classes has been we've gotten more WPIAL teams into the state championship games. I was going through some state championship history recently, and like especially in 3A, like those last 4 years or so of the 4 classification era, like 2011 to 2015, it was like just the semifinalists were like it was always like Bishop McDevitt out of Harrisburg and Cathedral Prep out of Erie and Archbishop Wood out of Philadelphia, and maybe like
it was always the same cast of characters.
Right. And it was always the private schools that could recruit kids. It was it was really hard for a WPIAL champion to break through that. Famously, Bill Chirpak, Thomas Jefferson's coach, once referred to Cathedral Prep as that all-star team up north. Someone asked him like, "Oh, you get to play Cathedral Prep the next week after they won the WPIAL title." I was like, "Yeah, we'll see how we do against that all-star team up north." So, yeah, that's one of those quotes that stuck with me.
That's a show in and of itself. So
yeah. So moving on in 2A, Washington effectively almost has this conference locked up. They play McGuffey this week, so McGuffey could force a 3-way tie here if they win, but I think Washington's head and shoulders better than everyone. And we do have another true casket match here between Beth Center and Waynesburg, because of cancellations, forfeits, no contests.
It's unimaginable to me that a team with an overall record of 2-6. Now, I shouldn't say that, because a couple years ago, Steel High made the 1A playoffs at 3-7, but it was because their conference, they're playing teams that are 2 and 3 classifications higher than them, not playing teams of like classification. Oh my.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to,
right.
But golly, I mean, we're going to get a team who's 2-6 to get in.
Possibly, yeah. And actually, one thing I'll note here though is that I mean, Belvern should have one more, or not Belvern, sorry, Beth Center should have one more win, because their game against Fraser got canceled, and Fraser canceled it. And
all right, so they're 3-7. All right, I mean,
well, what the WPIAL said was, they said, and this was the really screwy thing. I did not agree with this, but they said that if a team cancels a game and has enough players to still play, it'll be considered a forfeit and the other team gets a victory. If a team cancels and doesn't have enough players to play because of COVID, injuries, whatever else, then it's considered a no contest. So Fraser didn't have enough players, so their game against Beth Center was considered a no contest. So Beth Center didn't actually get a win for it, even though they weren't the one, even though Fraser was the one that canceled the game. So basically what the WPIAL said was that because Beth Center's game against Fraser was a no contest, that for purposes of determining the playoffs, Waynesburg's actual victory on the field over Fraser, and if Charleroi beats Fraser on the field, it won't count towards the playoffs, which blows my mind. But at any rate, Waynesburg Beth Center are playing this week. The winner goes to the playoffs. The loser goes home. That's all you need to know here. In the Midwestern Conference, another true casket match between Freedom and New Brighton for the last playoff spot. Laurel has this conference locked up. and plays Neshannock this week, who lost a heartbreaker to Beaver Falls last week. Neshannock was up like 23-6, and Beaver Falls stormed back and beat them 26-23. So, but Laurel has this one locked up. Luke McCoy, their running back, is one of the top running backs in the WPIAL. I think he's still like 100 or so yards behind Najee Burt from Steel Valley. So, but Steel Valley has to play a very good Sarah Catholic team. So if Najee Burt doesn't have a very good game, Luke McCoy might be able to catch him too. And then Stowe Rocks clearly looks like the best team in 2A right now, although we'll see if they finally get to play Sarah Catholic somewhere down the line. And the one to keep an eye on here, though, is that Brentwood and Seton LaSalle playing Saturday night at 7:00. The fourth place team here and the fourth place team in the Allegheny Conference back here at the beginning are going to, one of those two will get selected as a 16th place wild card team to get into the playoffs. So that could determine fourth place there. So we'll see what happens in that game as well. So my playoff predictions, this one's a lot bigger all the way around, just because 16 teams are going to make it in. You talked about the 2-7 team making it. That's why I have either Best Center or Waynesburg slotted all the way down at the 16th seed. I was assuming Shadyside Academy would win the wild card. That's just an assumption on my part. Seton LaSalle is still very much alive for that as well. And so, just looking at the bracket overall, Stowe Rock should be the number 1 seed. I think the Sarah Catholic Steel Valley winner should be the number 2 seed. And then you've got undefeated teams winning the other conference, right? You got Laurel undefeated winning the Midwestern Conference. You got Washington undefeated atop the Century Conference. So 3 versus 4, Laurel and Washington will probably slot in those places somewhere. And then the Sarah Catholic Steel Valley loser probably drops down to number 5 as the best of the second place teams with 1 loss. And then after that, kind of a free for all, and who knows how things are going to get slotted. I wound up just picking the other second place teams between Beaver Falls, Western Beaver, and Chartiers Houston. But maybe the WPIAL picks a third place team like a Neshannock or a Ligonier Valley, who I think are probably better than Chartiers Houston. But we'll see how it all kind of shakes out once the seedings come out as well. And once again here, this was just kind of the challenge of trying to slot teams against teams that aren't in the same conference. So a couple got moved around a little bit from where I might think their true seed line would be, just to try and make sure they get games against teams from a different conference in the first round. And then on to 1A. Congratulations to Cornell on winning their first conference title since 1983. They have it all wrapped up, and this one also has some variability here in the middle. That 5 teams are going to make the playoffs here. So between, you got your top 2 decided, but then with Shenango, Ulsh, Fort Cherry, Burgettstown, and Northgate all having a potential chance at working themselves out in the middle. And this is a WPIAL Blitz Show exclusive. The Post-Gazette and the Trib both have Shenango as not being clinched in the playoffs. But when I went through the same exercise and ran all 16 scenarios, you'll see that Shenango winds up above the line every time. So Shenango is in the playoffs, regardless of what happens this week. The Burgettstown.
Like I said, man, this is the show for football geeks.
I'm very I love this stuff, honestly.
I know you do, and so do I. See, I love it too, man. Like I said, if I wasn't on the show, I'd be watching the show every week.
These playoff scenario things, I love doing stuff like this. Like I have so much fun with this.
I love it too. I mean, I love it too.
Yeah.
My buddy Joe Mays out here is the one that runs through all of the he does like Bulldog Hour for Wilson, but he's also does all of the the power rankings, and just for 6A, but goes through all the different scenarios and everything else. So you guys have to have a knack for it, and you have to want to do it. So
yeah. And shout out to my buddy Steve Rishi on Twitter at BuckFever422. He loves this stuff too, and we kind of bounce ideas off each other and make sure we're on the right track. So thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate all the help too. And so the other noteworthy thing here is that the Fort Cherry Burgettstown game is a true casket match, because in the games where Fort Cherry wins, Fort Cherry gets in the playoffs, and the games where Burgettstown wins, Burgettstown gets into the playoffs. So that is a true casket match. Northgate still has 2 potential scenarios where they would get into the playoffs, but they need some specific things to happen in order for them to get in as well. In the Eastern Conference, the big story here is Leechburg getting into the playoffs for the first time since 1988. Congratulations to the Blue Devils ending their 32-year playoff drought. And honestly, it's 7-2 overall. Their 2 losses so far were to Clareton and Bishop Canevin, and they play Greensburg Central Catholic this week. So potentially they could enter with 3 losses, but still, a dangerous team that's one of the highest scoring teams in the WPIAL. I mean, they're scoring over 400 points in any season is phenomenal. Through 9 games is really darn good.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, they've been lighting up the scoreboard, averaging 47 points a game. Just an outstanding effort so far from Leechburg. And then another casket match on Saturday afternoon between Springdale and Riverview. Actually, not a true casket match, I should say, because if in the rare chance that Jeanette would somehow beat Clareton and Riverview would beat Springdale, then Jeanette would actually win the 3-way tie and get in.
Wow.
But other than that, most likely, easiest scenario, Springdale beats Riverview and gets in. Or if Jeanette loses, then the winner of Springdale Riverview gets in. And finally, in the Tri-County South Conference, we've reached finally the end. Top 4 spots are all secured. Monessen playing Avella this week, who got that 1 win over Bentworth. And now with Monessen at 2 conference wins and Avella at 1, Avella has a chance potentially to get into the playoffs. Also would need Jefferson, Morgan, and Bentworth to lose. So just to 1A playoff picture. 15 teams make the playoffs, one gets a bye. I think Clareton's probably the best team, although there could be some discussion between Clareton and Cornell for the top spot, but I think it'll be Clareton. And then after that, it really becomes a question with this bracket of where does all the Eastern Conference teams get seeded, right? I mean, you got Cornell at 2. I put Bishop Canevin at 3. Greensburg Central Catholic at 4, kind of assuming they beat Leechburg. Rochester at 5. The Tri-County South champion, West Green, lost a game to Burgettstown earlier this year. And, we saw Burgettstown was kind of at the bottom of the Big 7 conference, just struggling to get into the playoffs. So it's like, where do you see West Green, even though they're 6-0, 7-2 overall, like they lost that game to Burgettstown, and 6 out of their 7 wins were against Tri-County South teams. That's always kind of the question in 1A is how far down the bracket do the Tri-County South teams get seeded. So we'll see what happens and how it all starts to shake out. So just to recap, our 5 conference championships still to be decided. 2 of them are direct head-to-head matchups with Mckeesport against Bell Vernon and Sarah Catholic against Steel Valley. In the 4A Parkway Conference, Aliquippa can win the conference title with a win over Newcastle. Newcastle needs to beat Aliquippa and have Beaver lose to Blackhawk. It's a more unlikely scenario there. McGuffey can win the Century Conference Championship with a win over Washington by 8 or more points. If they win by 7 or less, even if they win, Washington still wins the conference title based on those tiebreaker points. And then in the Northeast Conference in 5A, that's the one that's probably the messiest. With all the head-to-head teams winning, if one of them loses this week, then that opens the door for someone else. If all 3 teams lose, Penn Hills wins the 4-way tie atop the conference, and if all 3 teams win, Penn Hills has the edge on the tiebreaker points right now, but that is subject to change. If teams win by less than 10. The true casket matches, Montour against Chartiers Valley, Waynesburg against Beth Center, Freedom at New Brighton, and Burgettstown at Fort Cherry. And ones that are effectively casket matches, where you'd need, like I said, like you would need Clareton to lose, or you'd need like Hampton to lose to Mars, or something crazy to happen. Greensburg, Salem, and Plum, Monessen and Avella, and Springdale at Riverview are effectively casket matches, but unless something crazy happens that could skew one of those scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we made it. Lots of content on tonight's show. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Heading into the last week of the regular season here. And it's been a great season so far. We're looking forward to a really fun playoff run.
Yeah, playoff run. We're going to basically, take it all the way to Hershey like we did last year, the Blitz show, thanks to you,
Yep.
Ian. I mean, and your crack reporting and statistics and graphics too. I mean, what makes it fun for me is how great, and I'm sure for the fans too, the graphics or whatever that you come up with there, just absolutely great, my friend. And I'm sure the fans love it. I know that I love it. And now the rubber really hits the road, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, now we're really starting to get down to it. And, for some teams, like we talked about, just getting to the playoffs is a huge accomplishment, right? For an Ambridge, a Laurel Highlands, a Leechburg. But now we're really getting down to it where, the elite teams are going to start to separate themselves, and we'll see who really is the conference title, or not the conference title, the WPIAL title contenders. I'd say this might be one of the deepest years that we've had. Really, there's only one classification where I feel like I know what team is going to win it, and that's 3A with Central Valley. I feel like all the
so
other
you don't
ones.
you don't think that Mount Lebanon is the prohibitive favorite? We went over this a couple of weeks ago.
We did this last week.
You don't think that they're the prohibitive favorite to win the 6A championship? I mean, we might as well just take 5 minutes here and I know that we have the teams there at the bottom, but the prohibitive favorite would be in 6A would be Mount Lebanon, because they've beaten everybody. They're undefeated. Their margin of victory, yet, you're not buying that.
And what I'll say is it's one thing to beat Central Catholic once in the regular season. It's a completely different thing to have to play Central Catholic at Heinz Field with all the pressure on you.
But and I get that. I mean,
and that's why I'll say, Mount Lebanon's the favorite in 6A. Moon is the favorite in 5A. But I think there's at least in 6A, there's one other team, Central Catholic, that's capable of beating Mount Lebanon. And that's really how I'm thinking of it is, I don't think if North Catholic or Elizabeth Forward plays their best possible game they could play, I still don't think they beat Central Valley. And that's the only one where I'm like, there's
there's a prohibitive favorite is Central Valley going into the postseason.
Yeah. And so I would say
watch them lose this week, which they're not going to do.
But I'd say Mount Lebanon's the favorite, but I wouldn't say they're the prohibitive favorite, So I guess it's the difference between if I'm putting like a 60%, 66 and 2/3%, if I'm putting.
So the reason you're saying they're not the prohibitive favorite is only because of genealogy. It's only because the tradition isn't the same as another school. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. And some of it is that, I mean, Mount Lebanon hasn't even been to a WPIAL championship game since 2000 when they won it. That it's been, and they have a great head coach in Bob Palco. I mean, he's won more WPIAL titles than anyone except for Bill Chirpak.
Bingo. Right. He's been there. Been there. He can, obviously he's leading these guys.
Yes. So he can do it, but it's a question of, when can he get the group of players that he has that's been outstanding all year. Pressure does weird things to kids. I think at the end of the day, we always forget that these are oh my God, 16, 17, 18
I never forget
kids
that. I mean, I walk out on the field and I'm going like, man, this is so much different on the field than it is in the stands, because you actually see that it's a bunch of kids out there.
Right. It's not a video game where the best team is always going to win, and pressure does weird things sometimes too. And the thing about Central Catholic is they have a really good defense. I know Mount Lebanon carved them up the last time they played, but Central's got a really good defense, and defense wins games for you in the playoffs. I've seen a ton of games over the years where you had teams come into the WPIAL championship games that were averaging, both teams were averaging 45, 47 points a game. They come into the championship game, the final score is like 14-13, right? Because it just turns into a defensive struggle. Teams start turning the ball over. Kids are nervous. They throw interceptions. They fumble the ball, whatever. Maybe it's rainy and sloppy and wet. The one year when Quaker Valley beat Aliquippa 2-0, Aliquippa had the ball the entire game on the Quaker Valley half of the field, but they just kept fumbling, or they couldn't get close enough for a field goal. And it was pouring down rain and sloppy and wet, and like quarterbacks were fumbling the snap, and like running back, like it was a disaster of a football game. But it was, it's one of those things where you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, so I'd say Central Valley is the only prohibitive favorite. Mount Lebanon, I'd put in that, like, if I'm putting a percentage on how confident I am, I'd put Mount Lebanon in that like half to 2/3. So like 50% to 66 and 2/3 percentage. Like Central Valley, I'm putting in the like 95% plus range, right? Like, and that's just because Central Valley is so loaded all over the field that they lost their starting quarterback this year. Their backup comes in and starts throwing the ball over the yard, and like he threw for like 700 yards in 3 games. It was just like, how good is this team? Yeah. So and 2A, I mean, you've got Stowe Rocks, you've got Sarah Catholic, but I mean, Laurel's a good team, Washington's a good team, Steel Valley's a good team.
It'll all play out here. This was the great week of geekness, and now after this week, it all comes down to the rubber hitting the road and the playoff scenarios. Actually, we're actually not going to do the show until Tuesday next week, just to make sure that we're getting all the playoff scenarios together, right?
Most likely, yes. We might do it Monday, because actually I saw today that the WPIAL is going to announce the playoff brackets on Saturday night instead.
Okay,
Typically they've done it on Monday nights, but this year they said they're going to do it Saturday night, which, considering there's that one game at 7:00 on Saturday that could potentially impact who makes the playoffs, I'm kind of wondering like what time on Saturday night they're going to do this. But we'll see what happens with all the other results, because maybe that one won't matter.
Maybe
I think all the other ones that matter are over at least by or at least start by noon on Saturday. So
hey, look, I mean, the NCAA can do it, like when they put that last thing out there. Well, if this thing happens, I mean, this is what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? But
yep. Yeah.
Anyway.
So they're announcing them Saturday night, which is a change. So we might do it Monday, might do it Tuesday. I'll let you know. And we'll obviously put it out there on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere else. So once again, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you found the show on YouTube, you know where to find us there. You can follow us on Twitter. We try
and put it everywhere we can. That's for sure.
Yep. And we're on Facebook now at WPIAL Blitz, so you can follow us there too.
Wow. Well, that's terrific, Ian. Hey, listen, thanks for a great show. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. And hey, the action really starts next week when we start with the WPIAL postseason, and then take all the way to Hershey. So, we're going to have to call this the WPIAL Blitz play. I don't know. I'm sure Ian will come up with a good name for it.
Yeah.
But until next week on a to be determined time, which will probably be Tuesday anyway, I'm Bruce Badgley. That's my buddy Ian. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it, gang. See you next week.